Hi, Kate. How you doing?
I'm trying to be calm.
Trying to be, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. What I'll do is that I will pre-introduce you to just to let everyone know, hey, this is Kate. She's going to be talking to us, and I'll give it to you from there. You'll have a lot of fun with this. I promise you.
So, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Everything's okay on my side. It's a bit of a well, I'm just doing a rewrite and something, so it's a bit of a slow day. But in general, I'm okay. How are you doing?
I was having a look at the NFVF page yesterday, and I saw that you were one of the projects that got through on the Netflix approval. So, congratulations on that.
Oh, you mean the for the shortlist?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
NFVF, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. It's for a film that I've been working on for a while. Actually, I think I spoke to everyone about it at one point. It's the film that Gather and I had that session where we were talking about scenes, and I use it as an example for. I wouldn't want you to. I wouldn't want you to spill the beans right now, but I'd love to hear about those four story arcs. I think that there is definitely that. Someone has said that story is universal. It's just the flavor of it that's local, and that idea I think is very interesting. That we really only express certain plots as time goes by, and yes, it could have like different locales and everything, but the journeys of those characters really coming down to four major things is interesting. Was tragedy one of them, by the way? Was it not that general?
So the one is called Become a Swan. The next is the accidental hero. The next is the willing hero. So it's Become a Swan, the unknown hero, the accidental hero, the willing hero, and the mistaken hero.
Oo. Oo nga na, Jay.
Uh, okay, so Bendilia, how are you doing? No, it's cool. I think she just muted herself.
I muted her.
Oh, okay. Okay, so subversion probably is tragedy then.
Yeah.
Where you expect something to happen, and through the actions of that character, the complete opposite happens. And I think that's interesting. The fifth one being subversion. That I'd love to talk about that at some point. That's definitely another topic for another day.
And the one was called Become a Swan. And so the film Black Swan is the absolute emblem of the subversion of Become a Swan.
Yeah, I love that film. I really reference it a lot when it comes to psychological horrors or psychological thrillers. It's excellent. It really is. Darren Aronofsky, a very very good filmmaker. So we're 4 o'clock now. Thanks to everyone who's actually jumped in early, which is great. It's fantastic. We're gonna give about 5 minutes for more people to come through, and as soon as 4 hits, we're going to jump straight into our topic for the day. So everyone, if you want to get a tea or a coffee or something to drink, preferably not alcohol, but something to drink, please enjoy the next 5 minutes, and then we'll catch up with you soon.
And Tabiso, do you want to type into your links what they're about?
I don't know if it's actually showing again on the screen for the chat for everyone, but what I will do is that
I see it for everyone.
See it for everyone.
Yeah.
Great. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to put the titles for it, and then I would like everyone to check it out. I'm gonna do the YouTube video first because I think that should be a great introduction to the book itself. So everyone who's part of the chat, as a little side item that you can enjoy later on, I've just been doing a little bit of research on certain character archetypes and so forth that I've seen in descriptions and breakdowns of films. And there's a very useful video that broke down Moonlight, the very great film by Barry Jenkins, and it breaks it down based on archetypes. And I think if you watch the book, if you watch the movie and then read the book that accompanies it, you might find another interesting way of looking at characters in your stories. So I'm putting it into the chat as we speak. Please check it out when you get the chance, and then let me know. Send me an email.
shall I chat a bit more about that, the story plots while we wait?
Sure, if you don't mind, that'd be great.
So the first one is Become a Swan, where it's there's the hero, the character is a reluctant hero, and then there's a mentor that's like, you are this, you are this, you are this, you are this, and the person doesn't believe it, doesn't believe it, doesn't believe it, goes through various training tests and trials, and finally rises to become the swan that the mentor's been telling them that they are. So the swan being metaphor for whether you become a superhero or a warrior or a great musician. Then the next one is the unknowing hero, and the unknowing hero does a deal that they don't know what the consequences will entail. And so
Okay.
the examples he gave of that was Shrek and Jojo Rabbit. And then the deal alters their lives, and they come through it transformed, and at the end they have to undo the deal. So they were saying each of these story arcs, there's a trope, and it has to have a certain resolution. And then the accidental hero is the hero that gets pulled into the story world or sucked down the rabbit hole, and they go on a rite of passage which transforms them, and then they return transformed and transform the world around them. And one of the
It's like
examples.
it's like a typical hero's journey then.
So they become transformed, but they return and they transform the world as well. So
Okay, nice.
then the next is the willing hero who stands up and does something about what is going wrong. And the example they gave is Beauty and the Beast, Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and the Hunger Games. So they said that they often call the willing hero, take me instead. So they will willingly go, or they will deliberately sacrifice themselves in place of another. And then they said they enter the dark forest, and at the end they must burn the forest down, whatever the forest is. They must destroy that world. So the chosen one who then destroys the world. So that will also be Neo from the first Matrix.
Oh right, yeah, that's perfect actually. But he doesn't quite destroy the Matrix in the first one, but I get the idea, I get the notion.
Like so whatever when the person is the willing hero, the chosen one, they've got to destroy the world. The world doesn't get left intact, it gets destroyed. And then the last one is the mistaken hero, where where the plot is a subversion, and then you either never leave the dark forest or the dark forest becomes part of you. So that's like Black Swan, or it's like the Joker, the latest Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, where the dark forest then lives on in his mind, and he becomes the dark forest. So that's the subversion. So I found those incredibly interesting and very stimulating to think of those, that how the arc, there is a very specific resolution that has to happen to the story arc.
Very nice, very nice. And in fact, it's probably a great point for us to touch again when we talk about character archetypes. For now, though, I would love to actually say hi to everyone who's joined the chat, who's joined joined the actual call itself. I just want to thank you very much for coming through today. It is a session today that I think will benefit many writers, will benefit many storytellers in general, and may actually help you describe your characters to people who aren't screenwriters and would like to know more about your decision making behind your characters. And joining me today, of course, we have Gavin. Gavin, of course, is the lead archetype, the lead archetype of the magician, and of course the wise man. And he has willingly and very, very kindly opened up this platform that we've been having going to our new speaker, Kate, who is joining us. And I think everyone knows Kate. You've definitely been participating in the Writers Calling. We loved your comments. We loved some of the insights that you've given, especially the previous sessions insights. And we thought that it might be an opportunity for us to expand this wonderfully growing community and to bring on different voices, especially different voices from, say, for example, of the perspectives that Gavin and I might have. And I think that Kate definitely fulfills that role and is going to be a great addition for us going forward. So with regards to today's session, we are going to be Kate's going to be giving a presentation on character and two different forms of looking at character using psychological analysis, as well as another form of analysis which Kate will be elucidating on. And then Gavin will afterwards be talking about archetypes. And then from then onwards, we will have our normal Q&A with everyone who's present. So please, I would love this, particularly today, if you have any questions, write them down. We're going to be going through a lot of feedback from you guys because I want to know how you guys come up with characters. And I hope through those questions and those answers, we might be able to talk a bit more about how I come up with characters. So without a doubt, oh, sorry, Gavin, would you like to say something?
Yes, just before we get in, we're going to just talk very quickly about collaboration and part of just another word on community and the purpose of this group. And I really appreciate Kate for being willing to step in front of into the spotlight with us. But when we started Thabiso and I, we really had the idea for a community that can grow and potentially learn to collaborate together and find a place where professionals through the Writers Guild can share resources, share ideas, share understanding, and potentially later on, literally physically collaborate. And we didn't want to just be Thabiso and I. We have, I think, lots to say, but we're very well aware that everyone, who's been doing this does. And it is really about a sharing of perspective and a sharing of journeys and a sharing of understanding. And later we hope to also open up to more hosts because, we'd like, as any filmmaker does, sometimes we're going to be in production, sometimes we're going to be really busy, and we'd love to just be able to keep this community sort of going and anchored and be able to rotate roles, that somebody's always there to host and to lead, but, it doesn't always have to be any of us. But we would like very much over time to kind of build connections between us, and this call is kind of the place that we've set up to make space for that to happen. So Kate, thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Thabiso and Gavin, for inviting me to share some of my processes. I just wanted to say, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And if you have a look in the chat column on the side, you'll see there's a whole lot of links that Thabiso and I have posted if you want to just copy and paste those into a doc or however you do it. So for just some resources as to what we're going to be chatting about today. And so a little bit of a background on me. I have been studying screenwriting in one way or another for the last 16 years. And for the last 3 years, not this year, the previous 3 years, I taught full time in an animation program, a 2D animation program, and I taught pre-production, which is developing all the materials you need before you go to digital. So you prepare the story, your premise, your pitch, your script, your storyboard, your environment design, and your character. Because, so this is really the entry point of this talk for me, is that if the students would start with very basic motions, like making a blade of grass move backwards and forwards, and then making a seaweed wobble around, and then making a ball bounce. And then they would start adding a tail or ears to the ball, so it would start becoming a character. And then they'd start working on a character walk cycle, just a character walking. And then they had to put character into the walk. So was it an old person? Was it a young person? Did they walk slowly? Did they hop, skip, jump in their walk cycle? So that you had to, and then when you are creating a character for your story, it's not just about drawing something randomly. Especially in 2D animation, you really work with shape and silhouette of the character, and each thing, there needs to be a reason for it. Why has the character got a big head? Or why have they got a small head? Why are they broad-shouldered? Or why are they very tall, thin, and narrow? There's a psychological reason that informs all of the artwork decisions you make when designing an animation character. So I started developing, I started putting tools together that I'd been using and looking for more tools to teach my students on how to develop the character, the personality behind the artwork, and how to, so that the character that they created would really engaging and wouldn't just be an artwork. There'd be a whole personality behind the artwork that would inform all the artwork decisions. So I looked at Christopher Vogler's archetypes, which come from the Jungian archetypes. So he works with those. I looked at a psychological tool that psychologists use called Enneagram, where you work out what kind of personality you are. And I looked at Myers-Briggs personality types. So we developed a character questionnaire, and the students would have to fill in what is their character's name, their age, their gender, their sexual orientation, their ethnicity, their religion, philosophy, or life belief, what was their income bracket, what was their education level like, what was the character's quirks and eccentricities. And then so they'd fill in this questionnaire kind of almost sort of off the top of their head to begin with. And then the questionnaire would become more and more complex, making them think more and more deeply about their character. And then I would bring the Myers-Briggs test into it. I'd say, okay, I'll share that on the screen shortly. And I'd say, okay, now start testing your character against the Myers-Briggs personality test to see where your character is inconsistent or where you can strengthen your character. So before I put the Myers-Briggs type personality tool up on the screen, I just want to say that another reason why we were talking about this is from structure, where Gavin and Tubbs have shared some really great talks on story structure. And character and story structure go hand in hand, because depending on who your character is, you put the character in a situation, and depending on the character reacts based on who they are, and that drives the story forward. What happens next based on the reaction? What happens next based on the next reaction? And what choices they make, what actions they take, what decisions they will and won't make, whether they're being passive or active as the story driver. And I recently had to be an external examiner on some third-year student film scripts. And a lot of them were really struggling with their stories feeling very shallow and very one-dimensional, and the characters feeling the same. So when I engaged with the students and started asking them questions about their characters, they'd really not thought their characters through deeply at all. They hadn't thought, like, what is their financial demographic? What are their religious or belief systems, philosophical systems? And that came through in the plot, and it came through in the characters. So the stronger you make your character, the better you know your character. The more multidimensional and real your character is, the stronger your story is going to be. So as you develop your story, you need to develop your characters as well. And you need to know your characters as well as you know your best friend or your sibling or your lover. I always use the sitcom Friends as an example. That if you've watched Friends, you could take Joey, for instance, and put him in any situation and be able to predict how he would respond. Same with Ross or Rachel, or Phoebe. You could be in a real life situation and go, how would Ross respond to this? And you'd be able to just guess how he would do it. You would know how he would do it, just like you do with a friend. And that's with your own real life friend. And that's because those characters were so deeply developed by the writers, the producers, and then worked into with the actors as well. So the better you know your character, the stronger your character is, the stronger your story is going to be. And I just wanted to share some. So often we know our main character quite well. Often they drive the story, and then the story can fall down around the supporting characters. So if you are having trouble fleshing out your supporting characters or your main character, these are just some tools that are available that you can use that make your life incredibly easy. It really sometimes feels like cheating, because once you work out how to use these tools, the characters just really start building themselves. So I'm going to share a screen here with an image of the Myers-Briggs personality type tool, and I'm going to explain how to use it. So after I've gone through that, I think I want to pause and see if there are any questions immediately after that, if anybody is not understanding how to use it as a tool. Is that okay? Will that be good? Gavin and Tabisol? Cool. All right. So share screen and share. Can you all see it? Is it up on your screen? Okay.
Yes, we can see it. Thanks.
So that for those of you who don't know this is called the Myers-Briggs personality type. And as you can see, it's what's your personality type. And if you look in the middle, there's a whole lot of colored blocks and with various letters, I, S, T, J. So what you do is you go to point number 1, and you can do this test for yourself first and work out what you are. And then you can see how to use it for your character. So you ask the question, number 1, are you outwardly focused or inwardly focused? If you, and then you work your way through the questions, could be described as talkative, outgoing, like to be in a fast-paced environment, tend to work out ideas with others, think out loud, enjoy being the center of attention. And then you go over to the next column, could be described as reserved or private. So as you go down these questions, you circle each one that resonates the most strongly with you. You might be, all of your answers might be E on extroversion, or all of them might be I on introversion, which then would tell you immediately whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. However, you might discover that some might be E and some might be I. And that's where you also start working out with your character that we aren't just clear cut on things. We aren't just one kind of being. We often have a cognitive dissonance where we've two different. So for instance, my brother is very religious and very scientific. And certain things are challenges and does like thousands of hours of research on. So we're not just one thing or another. We often have two aspects of ourselves at war within themselves. And we're going to discuss that just now when we talk about characters' wants versus needs. So you go through this questionnaire, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you ring each answer that's comes most close to being you or comes closest to being what you think your character is. And then you work out, are you an extrovert or an introvert? And you write down that letter. And you go to the next one, ask yourself the questions. Are you sensing or intuition? You go to number 3, ask the questions, which one do you get more of? Are you thinking or feeling? You go to number 4, and which one do you have more of? Are you judging or perceiving? And by then you'll have like, say now, you will be ESTJ. Then you go to the middle of the table and you look up ESTJ, and that's in the bottom left. And you'll see you are efficient, outgoing, analytical, systematic, dependable, realistic, like to run the show and get things done in an orderly fashion. So you can use this to test out your characters and see where your characters are sometimes in conflict with themselves. So that's a Myers-Briggs tool. So before I go on, we go to stop share. It's back. How do I put it back to full screen, guys, or stop share?
Yeah, you can just stop sharing. That should be fine.
Find the icon to do that.
Just try escape.
Escape. Thank you. Nope, it's not doing it. Okay. I'm going to just close that. Then I'm going to just close that window for now. Has it stopped sharing?
Yes, it has.
Okay.
Yes, it has.
All right. So does anybody have a question from that yet? You want to raise?
Actually, yes, I do have a question. So with regards to the Myers-Briggs test, would it be a case that you're coming to it after you've gotten an idea of a character that you'd like to fulfill a function in the plot, and then you flesh it out further with the Myers-Briggs? Or is it something that you look at normally as, I wonder if this character could work on in this story, and you have a look at what some of the traits that you can use in your story?
Okay, so that's an interesting question, and sorry if you can hear my dogs. I always go to it after I've started developing my character. It's when I'm wanting to refine my character and make my character more multidimensional. So I've already got, so okay, this is the character's the sidekick. They're quirky, they're outspoken, they speak before they think. And then, so I'll have a couple of ideas of what the character already is. And then I'll take them through the Myers-Briggs personality test. And it will make me think about them more deeply. And I'll go, oh, but actually where they should be this extrovert choice, they're actually an introvert on this section. So I'll note that down, where that little aspect of them is out of character. So I'll write that specifically down. And, you know, when it's got the 4 questions on each side, I mean, you know, where it gives you the different points. So wherever my character doesn't feel solidly one particular thing, suddenly they're this other thing. So I thought they were introvert, but hold on, this is more, I feel this response is more suitable to them. I write down that. And it starts fleshing your character out more and more and more, where your character is an individual, where they're not just a stereotype.
And adding to that, would it be a case that you would be taking a character type, putting them in a really different situation, one they're completely uncomfortable with, and that is another form, and you know, they deal with the situation, and that's another form of growth maybe their character needed? That could be an idea for a story.
Yes, and then also if you're putting them in an awkward situation, but you're not yet sure how they would respond, then you can go back to the personality type. You can go back to the personality test and see what does the test say they should respond? How should they respond? But if that doesn't ring true to you, then that will help you to identify what your character would do. So it becomes a weighing scale, a personality building tool that's a weighing scale of how would your character react? What would they feel? What would they think? What would their judgments be? So there is in the chat box on the right, I have typed in a resource there, Susan Storm, founder of Psychology Junkie, and her website. So this is like I can't believe that this resource exists. And it really is like a full-on character building tool. But she is a psychologist. And so if you go into that website, she then takes the INFJ or the ISTP, whatever Myers-Briggs personality type it is, and she builds on them much, much more fully. And you can go, how do they respond under stress? How do they deal with crisis? How do they deal with life's complications or whatever? What are they like at middle age? What are they like in their teen years? So she gives you just so much information that you can use to build characters. So it's especially, so I had to develop a cast of characters for an animation, essentially a sitcom. So they're little cupboard monsters. So it's kind of like Friends in the form of little monsters for kids. And each character had to have its own fully developed personality, and they had to be sufficiently different from one another so that they could react off one another. And this website helped me immeasurably to flesh out each character fully and to understand how, the complexity of characters. What's going on in the back? Oh, who opened that? Did I open that? Are you guys seeing what's on my screen?
That's actually me. Sorry, I just wanted to share the screen to help everyone see the website that you were mentioning. So please do continue.
Cool. Then it wasn't a virus suddenly seizing my computer. Okay, so I need to go view to just minimize exit full screen. Okay, so now the next thing, character Enneagram. Yeah.
So before you continue, Kate, I see that Lungelo has a question.
Okay, cool.
Lungelo, if you mind just asking a quick 30-second or a minute question, I think Kate will definitely be able to answer you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. No, just really quickly, I know of the Enneagram. I know a little bit about the Enneagram. I've been to a session about that, and it was very interesting, but I found it a little bit overwhelming and very complex. But I know very little about this Myers-Briggs one. But I noticed that the link that you gave us, and I'm on it now, but it seems to like mix the two, or are they the same thing, or are they separate? Because my thing about the Enneagram one, I know you're gonna present it now, but you know, I thought, okay, this is something I have to invest a little bit more time in and really wrap my head around it. But just what you just gave us now with the Myers-Briggs is a much more, at least, I don't know how complex it is. It's a little bit more simpler and a little bit easier to wrap my head around, and I might be wrong, I don't know. But my question is really, are they the same thing or are they separate? Because what you just said now made a lot of sense in terms of as a I guess as a filmmaker, a way to try and suss out and add layers to your characters, which is what I need right now for a script I'm working on. So I'm glad that you're sharing this information. But I just wanted to know, are they the same thing? Are there parallels? Are they different? And then also if, I guess this is the website you're giving us, Psychology Junkie, but I see that there's Myers-Briggs and there's also Enneagram. So I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Lungelo.
Yeah, makes total sense, Lungelo. And so for me, Myers-Briggs is my first. So we're going to talk about character roles, which is archetypes. So my first stop off is what is your character's role in a story? But so I think I maybe should have started there. So I'm sorry, but we will go back to that. Then my next stop off is what is my character's Myers-Briggs personality type? And so it's the next step in the journey. So the first step is what is your character's role, and that goes to character archetype or Christopher Vogler's archetypes as well. Your next is what is your, and that gives you a very broad description of what your character's role is. Then I go to Myers-Briggs and I start working out how does my character think or feel, judge, or introvert, extrovert. So I start working out those aspects of my character. And then I go to the Enneagram, which is kind of like character archetype, but much more detailed. It goes into the psychology of the archetype. So Enneagram and archetype are quite closely linked, and your Myers-Briggs is an introduction into it. So I know, so there are three different things, but they are all parallel. And they help you they're just tools to help you work out your thinking around your character, and use them go into it as in depth as you need to, or not. And then also where, for instance, I was using the Enneagram tool for one of my characters, and a lot of the things I was saying about my character is what my character should have been, but she was the opposite. So I made specific notes of where in this particular case, the character's a dormouse. You know, so we're talking about an animation world where they think and they speak and they walk and they talk. So she's a dormouse, but she's been raised from infancy by a human, the little girl in my story. So a dormouse should be shy, should be very cautious, should hold itself back. But because she's been raised by Poppy and she's never had to deal with any danger in the real world, and everything has literally been served to her on a plate, she's a whole lot of opposite things she should be. So I noted those things down, and that helped to really make her this fully dimensional little character. So just because the Enneagram tells you this is what your character should be, feel how that resonates with the character. And if your character isn't that, if you know your character isn't that, note it down so that you know specifically my character should be this, but in fact, they're like that. Then think, why are they like that? Could it be a childhood circumstance? Could it be where they got maybe broken in childhood, or where they had an incredibly awesome mentor who helped them to become a much stronger, braver person? So when your character goes against time, ask yourself why. And that's where you start getting into your character's backstory, and you start building your understanding of your character and the layers and the depths of your character even more. So Lungelo, it is overwhelming at first, but just work your way through all the tabs on that Enneagram website. And I'm happy for you to contact me at any point if you want to chat about it some more, or to just guide you through how to use the website some more. But it's as I say, you end up feeling like you're cheating, because it's just like your characters just start getting built in front of your eyes by using these tools. So did that answer the question, Lungelo?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I need to dig deeper, and yes, I think I will try and reach out if and when I have questions. But yeah, thank you. This is very useful.
Okay, great.
Great. Kate, sorry, just for the interest of time, I don't know if you would like to, if you'd like to share some of the space with Gavin with regards to archetypes, because I see that there are archetypes mentioned in the enneagrams that we can see right here.
Okay. So I just wanted to say one more thing, and then Gavin, it's over to you. And that is the thing I should have started with. And that is, you need to ask yourself, what is the role your character is playing in the story? Are they the hero, the sidekick, the ally? Are they the mentor? Are they the threshold guardian? Are they the enemy? What is that role that your character is playing? Because obviously, you're not only writing your great awesome hero character or your very flawed hero character, you're writing all the supporting characters around them. And each of those have a story role and a story purpose to fulfill. And you need to identify what that role is for each character, because you also need to identify, have you got more than one of a certain kind of character, or can you join two characters to form that particular story purpose or story role? So each character that is in your story has a purpose to fulfill. They're not just random. And then that purpose or that role comes down also to archetypes. And then that's what Gavin's going to be talking about. Gavin, over to you.
Gavin, you're muted.
Yes, sorry, my mom is visiting and making lots of noise. Just want to just see where we are on time. Okay, there. Kate, if you can put that diagram back up, that Enneagram one, that would be helpful. But I'm not going to go deep into archetypes because we don't really have time to get into a massive discussion. I just wanted to kind of simplify the idea, because it is a very helpful one. It comes up always when it comes to character, because in a sense, every character is basically playing out an archetype. And as Kate said, I mean, an archetype and a role isn't really a very different thing. So archetype is a word that was kind of brought back into the language through Carl Jung's study of kind of basic types of people. But he said that he took it from Plato's doctrine of the forms, which is one of those really kind of ambiguous doctrines that has been debated for many years about what it really means. But briefly, it kind of, what he was saying is that, everything in the physical world participates in some sort of spiritual reality. And it's the thing that it is in virtue of its participation in terms of essentially what we could call today like a program. So like a table is a table because it performs a certain function, and all tables will participate in the form of tables. So to be a table, you have to have like a solid thing that you can put stuff on. And then in some ways, anytime there's a solid thing you can put stuff on is used for that purpose, and it's a table, even if it's just like a round tree stump or a box. But then it's your table. And there are like certain, like, or a nest, for instance, there are many different types of nests and birds' nests or whatever nest, but it's a nest if it fulfills the function of keeping, eggs dry and protected and housed. And the same is sort of true of behavior. And there's certain functions or roles that we play in other people's lives. And archetypes is simply, you can think of as functions. So here, like if you look at, I mean, I don't know the Enneagram, but they're breaking up these archetypes, and there's many different types of archetypes. I mean, people have different lists, and the major arcana of the tarot are all archetypes and archetypal roles and stages of lives and so on, that we also play. It's quite a nice one to look at. But if you look at, like, okay, here's the protector, which, it's a very clear function. So if you have a person in who's maybe a sidekick in a hero's journey, and maybe they're just there to protect the hero, then it's very clear what they're there to do. But knowing that, you can always play against type. So once you really know the function, the archetype, then it's very fun to play. So if your protector is perhaps like in Shrek, if now I'm thinking animation, is like a donkey who's perhaps a bit cowardly and useless, then you have a very interesting person playing the role. Or if you have, archetypally, basically, there's really two types of character outside of the hero. That's people who push the hero into what they're doing, or the more pull support function. So, a mentor or the love interest will be like an incentivizer, someone who pulls the hero forward towards the change they need to make, whereas the antagonist will be that push thing that's constantly challenging them to make that change, challenging them to be something different. So like a classic archetype is a tempter or a temptress. And that could be, the archetypal sort of siren who's tempting on a sexual level, or it could be, the rich person who's offering an incentive, tempting someone forward. And if you take, the role of, okay, I've got, say, a siren, and, can be the super hot, woman, and that's a very obvious, very stereotypical sort of archetypal thing. But if you take that same role of the temptress and make her someone maybe who's not physically attractive but has something else, then you have much more interesting story possibilities. Or maybe it's not a woman, it's a man, or a whatever, to a man, or something else. It's how once you know the role, the archetypal roles to tempt, that's what they're doing, then you can play that in so many different ways, and you can get creative with it. But it's important. So Tobias was mentioning just before the call goes that all these things sort of follow an intuitive process of characters arriving in the story. And for me, that's the same way. I'll look at, if I start a story, start with the hero, and then populate it, with all the people around them are there because they play a certain role. But often you don't necessarily know what that role is. You kind of come with the character first. But as soon as you identify why they're there, what role they're playing, there will always be something. Then it's very easy to shape someone who plays that role in an interesting way. And that's the really the basic simplified thing I just wanted to get across, is that every character is, in a sense, plays an archetypal role. If you can go through your script and be aware of what the role is that they're playing, then you have a lot of role to come up with something interesting. Sorry, a lot of room. If you look at the psychological literature, there are just basic roles that we play. I mean, mother is one, mentor, obviously the hero itself, and it goes on and on and on. Again, people can find different words, and they do this in very different ways. But every story I've ever written, you'll find a role over the course of the film, and you'll also find a role in your scene. And being aware of what those roles are is so important, because if a character's in a scene and doesn't have a role, it doesn't need to be there, and it shouldn't be there. And the same if it's in a story. So just to reiterate what Kate was saying, often you find 2 characters, 3 characters playing the same role. And any actor, wants a substantial role. And if you're splitting the same function to 3 different actors, then generally you're not creating interesting, unique parts, and you're not giving them substance, and you're not giving them screen time. So being aware that you can collapse, 3 characters are playing the same role into one, and giving them all the stuff, means you'll create a character that an actor is more wanting to play, because there's lots of screen time and much space for them to play that role. So it's really important, as far as possible, to be aware that you should not dilute the roles unless there's a really clear reason to have two characters to do the same thing than one. Almost inevitably, you want just that one person playing the one role. So yeah, that's basically just what I wanted to put out while we're on the subject of character. Tibiso?
Thanks, Kevin. I really appreciate the breakdown in archetypes. And I think definitely we'll come back to actually having much more in-depth conversation about archetypes. I do want to hear about the different archetypes that are present, not only in our modern stories, but throughout history that have been present as well. And I'd like to actually ask you at some point, how does that apply to Shakespearean stories? You know, how do these things apply, and how can we use them in active tools in the stories we tell? And we'll definitely come back to it another day. But of course, we've almost finished our first half of our session, which is the 45 minutes for us to discuss something. But of course, from here on out, we'd like to turn the conversation to everyone who's participating. I'm sure that there's a lot of information that's been given to you guys about the nature of character, how you can use some formal some formal information to help flesh out character once you know what their role and their function is in a story. And I think that these are definitely exciting tools to try map out characteristics of your character. But maybe you're currently struggling with a scene, just as Gavin described, where you have a character appearing in the scene, but really they have no function, and they're actually dividing function from someone else who could be made stronger by collapsing two characters into one. So I would love to ask anyone in the audience, or anyone who's participating, not audience, this is a community after all, who has a question about character, has a question about anything that's been spoken about today itself. And also, if you have a comment, please do come through. I think some people have put into the chat some comments, but I actually wanted to ask Kate and Gavin a question with regards to how did you come up with the how did you come up with this being the need for you to discover your characters? You know, both in finding out what an archetype is, and both in discovering how you could use Myers-Briggs personality tests and Enneagrams to craft your characters. Was it a situation that you were struggling with something and this information came by, or was it something that you were taught through an educational system? I'll ask Kate first.
So I would say that it was when I was fairly early on, when I was first started learning screenwriting, and I read The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler, and I started dealing with his, where he takes Jung's archetypes and he gives them some other names. Some of them are the same, but where I was working on a script and working on what were the roles that my characters were playing, and where I realized I was missing certain characters, and I needed to then create those character roles, or where there were people already, perhaps too many antagonists, and I had to collapse them into one. So that was gosh, maybe 2010, 2011, when I started with Christopher Vogler. And then when I started in 2016, I was then developing this animated series of the Cupboard Monsters, and I was attending some online classes, and the teacher recommended looking at Myers-Briggs. So I started using Myers-Briggs then. And then when I was just Googling Myers-Briggs the one day, I got led to Enneagram, and I hadn't known about Enneagram before. So yeah, that was my journey of, and as I say, when I discovered Enneagram and discovered how much information there is that she puts there that you can use towards creating character, really, especially with your supporting cast. It's like, as I say, it feels like a cheat sheet. But anyway, so it's a great tool. That's my answer.
Yeah, so for me, it's very much a case that I think, like every single one of us, and we've said it a few times already on the call, that the essence of story is character. And why people behave as they do is essentially what character means. The values you hold and how you make choices, which is often unconscious because character always just expresses whether whatever you are, you speak what you are, you do what you are, you can't help it. And understanding that's always been a big part of my journey. So once you start writing story, you obviously are then faced with that question of how does character work, and how do people work, and how does this happen. So for me, I've not got into the Enneagram or to the Myers-Briggs, but there are so many ways of understanding people. We just kind of must be hardwired for it, because it's kind of the most important thing in the human world is how do we understand the people around us and to engage with them, how do we receive them. So in some ways, I think every one of us has some lived understanding of character. And it does need to be, I think, a topic of investigation and study for any writer or actor or director. It's just what we do. So for me, the one tool I found very recently that over the last 7 years that I really, really enjoy and work with is the Gene Keys. And the Gene Keys basically works partly on the ancient I Ching format, and there's 64 sort of archetypal codes that also correspond to 64 archetypal journeys that any human being can kind of go on, from a flaw or a shadow, the unconscious behavior, and how that acts out in either a active or oppressive, a reactive or a repressive form. And then it goes all the way to what happens when you make that, when you transmute that shadow into a higher way of being. So it basically describes the arc potentials of any character along 64 archetypal journeys. So I find that an incredibly handy study, and it's something I've also been studying myself and pursuing for 7 years, because it's incredibly deep and rich, and I think is probably the most don't know the right word, rich, but probably the most advanced kind of thinking on the subject that I've ever come across. This might be one way of putting it. It's almost magical. So at some point I want to present maybe the Gene Keys, but it's just that thing. It's just, we are character, we deal with character. And so studying character is inescapable.
Thank you, Gavin. Appreciate it. And also, Kate, really do appreciate the background that you have brought in with regards to that journey that you undertook to find out this information. I think everyone has some form of way of dealing with character, and I think that you having brought some very formal tools is incredible. I think everyone should find themselves looking at this and deciding for themselves if it's something they want to use in fleshing out stories, especially TV shows. I think that this could definitely benefit long form narrative. So Lungelo, I see that you've had your hand up for quite a bit of time. Please switch on your camera, and really this goes to everyone. Switch on your cameras if you can. And Lungelo, please ask your question.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot to switch on my camera before. I'm on my phone right now because my laptop wouldn't. There we go. Okay, hello again. No, the question that I had when you opened this up was also has partially been answered, because I was actually looking at, I'm trying to figure out, yeah, I'm writing a feature. It's my first feature, and short films are easier for me to write. And that's because I can wrap my head around a 10 to 20 to 30-minute film. But the idea of feature films and episodic series has always been daunting. But I figure you build up your capacity with everything, with like anything else, the more you do it. So I'm really trying to think. I've realized that I enjoy this work, but I feel like I need to go deeper and deeper into character. So my question, which has partially been answered, I have a more specific one. Is I went online and I just found a book, MBTI Manual by Isabel Briggs Myers, and it seems to be a manual. So have any have you, Caitlin, used any particular books or any resources? I know you said you studied online as well, but I enjoy studying, I'll do an online course or read a book by myself. But if there was like some kind of a resource where one could spend, dedicate a month or 2 or 3, once or twice a week, are there programs like that? And if so, could you share that, please?
So, Lungelo, I spent a long time going through that Susan Storm Enneagram site, going through all the different Enneagram types, reading about how they interact with each other. So I've used it as a course for myself. I haven't read that book that you mentioned, but yeah, that the Psychology Junkie website has got tabs and tabs and tabs and posts and posts and posts, and she sends out a weekly email, and I really use it a lot to learn from. So I haven't that's been my main sort of form of study of character.
Got it. Thanks.
Actually, I want to add a little bit to that conversation, Gela. I'm glad that you're writing a feature form. I'm glad that you're making something that's of a long narrative and really is, I would say, not the apex of what we do, but definitely the biggest expression of telling film, and that's in the feature film form. And I'm glad that you're taking on the task. I'm pretty sure that it is daunting. I think that with regards to that journey, I think really have fun with it, come up with something that you want to watch, and from there actually make something that feels big. If it doesn't have to necessarily be big in terms of characters or whatever, but take an idea and find out the different flavors of it, take the different shades of it, how it applies to questions that you have in your life. And maybe that leads to, big discoveries about your feature film that you don't ordinarily have. I mean, that's, if I'm going to talk a little bit about character and how I come up with characters, I take something called the Socratic method. It's an idea that was handed down from Stanley Kubrick and goes all the way back up to Socrates. And that's the question of questioning. So you have a part of your story in which someone is doing something. So you ask yourself, is this the character to be doing that? Is this action something that this person would be doing? If not, is this something that is against their intention, against their objectives? And if that's the case, how can I rewrite the scene, or how can I write the scene that works in that favor? Or if I'm testing them in that scene, how can I rewrite it to amplify this counter objective? So that's how I approach scenes, and how I approach my characters, especially if I'm doing a rewrite in something. I always ask myself questions and always put myself in that position of that main character and try to imagine what life would be like as that person. And then as the story progresses, I ask myself, is this something I would do? And is this something that the character would do? And if we two things are separate from each other, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And does that unveil a shade of the character that I didn't know about? So I think if you're dealing with feature films, it is a series of questions. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Have fun with it. Thanks. I see, Inez, you've raised your hand. Would you like to ask something?
Hi, I'm not going to turn my video on because I'm on cellular data over here, so we gotta save where we can. But I guess this is more of like a personal question about your methods as writers. Firstly, thank you for holding these sessions. They've been really cool and just like making me not feel like I'm in my head the whole time, alone with a bunch of crazy characters. But my background is acting, so a struggle that I often find when I'm writing is that I get really hung up with all the weirdly specific details of my characters. And I just want to know, like, for anybody, I guess, that's in this room, like, what are some of your own methods to not get hung up on doing very, very huge backstories for your characters that I guess end up mostly not being used in the final story, or at least cause you to lose your way, I guess, with the story. Because I find often that I get so hung up on all those little details. And I know we all want to make a story that is unique, and we all want to tell something, a story that's never been told before, even though we understand that most things are copies. But yeah, how do we find a way out of that rabbit hole of character detail? Because sometimes I think I have a solution, and then I find myself deep in the hole again. So cool.
Before anyone else jumps in, thank you very much for Inez. I really appreciate that question, and it's a unique perspective actually, coming through as an actor, taking on the task of writing as well. I'm pretty sure Gavin and Kate want to actually answer your question in great detail, but I'll speak to something that you might know as an actor. There's the idea of crow. So as a director, if I'm talking to an actor, I'm going to be talking to them from the reference point of crow. Crow, for anyone who wants to know about it, is character, relationship, objective, and then, of course, it's what, where, why, and when. So if you can see from that breakdown, character is only a fourth of what the scene is going to be about, in terms of me blocking the scene and of me showcasing and talking to actors about where things are going to happen, when it's going to happen, and more importantly, why, and why that specific person, and why it's not you who's going to be getting it, but that person, and vice versa. So when I look at developing characters, it's very helpful to have an idea of what your story is and what your scene might be before you start asking very, very deep questions about your characters. If you have like the slightest small outline for your story or for your scene, and it really is just maybe one or two ideas, it might help a lot in terms of understanding, is this character part of the story, or is it just a character that I really like talking about? It might be a character of an entirely different story. So I would say do the backstories, do those things, because that's an interesting part. You might find a whole other film in just the expression of a character. It's happened to me a couple of times when I found a character which is very interesting and I really liked the idea, but wasn't right for the story. So I made another story about that character. So I would say follow that idea, follow that thing. If you love doing backstories, don't stop yourself. Just know that it will take you longer to write. I would say write stories, write screenplays, and so forth. But if you know when you are going overboard, take a step back, ask yourself, Crow, is this character right for the scene? Is the character right for the story? Is this character and another entire story by itself? So that, I would think, is maybe a little bit of an actor trick that you could use in your writing. And I think you should definitely draw on your acting experience to help with your writing in that regard. But I'm going to obviously hand back to Kate and Gavin to flesh it out even further how they might answer that question.
Okay, so for me, I know it's an interesting question because I often also find that writers don't do enough backstories and don't make the characters unique and interesting. And obviously, as a writer or anything, we're always in this relationship with what we do, where finding that harmony between doing too much and doing too little, and finding that sweet spot. And it sounds like obviously that because of your acting training obsession with character, then you're doing too much with it. So for you, I would really recommend one focusing on the difference between characteristics and character. So, so much about a character that a lot of people write is superficial things, the color of the hair, everything actually matters. Every characteristic really does affect how the world engages, interacts with you, and it does matter, but it's not important. The most important thing is really like the strengths and the weaknesses of the character in terms of the role that they want to play, that they do play in the script. And your protagonist itself does deserve as much attention and energy as you're going to give them in terms of developing their world and their character, but the subsidiary characters not so much. Once again, it's like always driven by the function that they play. So you could write a first draft where you haven't really thought out the subsidiary characters and you just focus on the role they play in relationship to the hero. And then at the end, you could probably do bios on them and being very clear, like, okay, well, if the mentor is a mentor because he's wealthy and because he is going to help my character understand how money works and business works, then I'll invent, those aspects of their life that shows me how they got the strengths that they needed to do this. And then also those that, those core wounds, figuring out the core wounds that kind of govern the unconscious behavior is always like very key. And knowing, strengths and weaknesses of the character in relationship to the role they play is that's kind of what your backstory really needs to do. You don't need the rest. It's always nice to know as much about your character as you can. And for most writers, I always try and get them to write super long backstories, because also they don't focus it on the essentials. Like if I do a character bio, I'm generally looking at a page, maximum 2, but I'm really looking at the childhood, the environmental kind of way they grew up. What has shaped them, and then what's given them in their backstory the virtues or vices necessary to play the role that they do in the script. And every time you sort of go deep into the characters, they do become more free and they do speak, and it does really help. So there's, if it's stopping you from writing, if it's stopping you from actually getting into writing scenes or writing sequences or planning the thing and getting through it, then obviously, you just need to shift your focus. But you can always come back to developing those characters later once you know what that story looks like, and it always makes it better. So yeah, it's just that thing of making sure you don't get sidetracked, but it sounds like you're aware of that already. And then I just do say, look to function. Great.
Thanks, Gavin.
So characters also will often come to me in dreams, and also sometimes they will be inspired by a person I know or an amalgamation of people I know. But the other night I was, so I'm busy developing a historical series, and my main character ends the end of the second season in a very, very, very dark place. And I was going, how am I going to get her out of that dark place in the beginning of season 3? And it was midnight and I was sitting up really, really thinking this through. And then this character just came to me, this other character came, as she is going to be a vessel to take the story forward. And this character just like swooped in and kept me up for like another 3 hours. And I just like wrote about 6 pages of detail for this character out. And now I love this character, absolutely love her. And I don't know if I'll even subject her to any of the MTB tests or the Enneagram or anything like that, because she's come to me so fully formed. And so I'm not a very good person to ask in terms of when should you stop writing backstory, because sometimes characters just take over. And then I just get it all out into their backstory. And this character is now see what role they're going to play in the 3rd season, the 4th season, and very pivotally in the very last episode of the 4th season. And she's solved a whole lot of story problems. And that's because I allowed her to just, to really go back into her backstory and to really just write her down. And so when it's flowing, don't stop it. Well, that's my advice. When it's flowing, don't stop it. Let it out, put it down there. And like Tabitha says as well, you might find that character starts to form in another story or gets used somewhere else as well. But when it's flowing, let it flow. And then you can come back to getting, okay, now I've got to go back to discipline. But yeah, I don't turn off the tap when the tap's flowing. That's my maybe bad advice, but that's what I do for myself.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Kate. Really appreciate it. And Inez, that's a great question. Before we get to Lundeka and Khalid, who have both got questions, I'll just say that if you, in terms of, it's something that's come from this conversation that we've been having, in terms of your backstory, if you can answer why that character chooses to do what they do at any given point, that means, of course, what their motives are and where those motives come from. You go a long way to figuring out what they will do, what they will choose, or how and why they will choose to act or not act at specific and critical plot points in your story. So if you can have that as some objective of your backstory, trying to figure out what their motives are and won't they do something at a critical point in your story, you will find your backstory is doing a lot of the hard work when it comes to you writing the scenes and also figuring out the rest of your story. So I would like to open up to Londeka and then to Khalid, who both have questions.
Hi,
And turn on your
everyone.
mic, turn on your mic, turn on your camera if you can.
There you go.
Okay, Londeka, I'm just going to quickly, just going to quickly pause you. You can switch off your camera. Switch off your camera.
So thank you so much for this session. It's really, really amazing. Can you hear?
Yeah, please switch off your camera. I
Can I
don't know
carry
why I
on?
did that. Please
Okay,
switch off- yeah.
but no, the camera is off. It says, yeah, it's off now. Can you not see me?
No, we could see you, but it was charring your data, so now we can hear you.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. So basically, I'm just saying I am working on. So I'm new to the space of writing, and I've decided that I'm actually just going to work on like a specific project so that I can move myself to the next step and next step. So I'm adapting a book into a feature film, and I've been struggling a lot about working on the main characters, you know, and giving them like the meat that they deserve. And I just want to say thank you to Kate for actually bringing out the point about the supporting characters, because I had a super aha moment 5 seconds earlier on. I was like, oh, actually I can use her story is. So thank you for that. The other part that I'm sort of struggling with is that one of the main characters that introduces the story, you don't really see them physically or visually, for lack of a better word, but their presence really needs to be felt, because the reason why the main character is actually there, you know, and why this whole event has actually transpired the way that has transpired. But the way I visually see it is that on the film, you probably will only see them once or twice. However, they really need to be felt completely throughout. So how do I actually put that into words on paper? And then the third thing, so I'm like, so last question. The third thing is, so I really want to try and stay as true as possible to the book, because of, I mean, the story that I chose it because of the story that it has. But how can I just make sure that I really do stay true to it and not try to bring in too much of my own personal storyline as well? You know, I know we're talking about if you're writing a character, also tap into the people that you know. How do I balance the two? That's I think that's the question.
Thank you, Londeka. Actually, that's so there are two questions that you're asking, and I'm sure that both Kate and Gavin will definitely answer whichever question I fail at answering. But I will speak to first the second part of your question, your second question at least, with regards to how do you keep yourself out of the story in terms of when you're going too far into your own story and trying to flesh out a character. Really, it comes down to your intention for that story. Is it a biography? Is it a fictional story? And I'm asking that question not to make to make it seem like a dumb question, but really you have to ask yourself: is this character alive? Is this character just a shade of me, or is this character a living, breathing thing? And that does take time. It's going to take you some time, especially because you're starting the journey now. It's going to take you some time to figure out if this is something that lives and breathes versus something that is you just describing what you would like to happen as your main character in the story. And I think that, but I'm pretty sure Gavin can speak to how you can edit that out, or how you can figure out if it's genuine or not in terms of how your character is behaving in the story. But I would say even just asking that question, is this me or is this the character, might go quite a bit of a way in helping you figure out what's happening in the scene with that character, and if this character is a fully functional 3-dimensional thing. So the first part of your question is, if you have a character that really you're feeling the absence of, and the absence of that character has a huge effect on what's happening in the story. So you can talk a bit about, I mean, it's a complex thing to do. It really is. And that's really you figuring out what this character has done behind the scenes that affects the rest of the story. And if them not being there results in a lot of the troubles that happen in the story. So say, for example, you had a judge who was about to try a really big case, and he's a great, honest judge, and you knew that the case was going to be a well-tried and fair case. But that judge dies in the beginning of the story, and another judge comes through, one who's very persuasive, very impressionable, very moved by his emotions and so forth. And you know the effect that a good judge would have had on that story, and you can allude to it through different characters talking about why they're not getting a fair trial. But it would be that, I mean, it's an idea. It's not really necessarily a great plot thing to follow, but you can feel when a character is absent because of the ramifications of them being absent. Maybe something would have happened, something would have been solved if they were there, but because they're not there, the story is exploding as a result. And I just want to say that when you're doing this exercise, this very difficult exercise of having the absence of a character inform the story, understand that it has to be present in actions and in events. Because the one thing people always do when they're dealing with a question like this is to leave it up to dialogue. Oh, if so-and-so and so-and-so were here, then this would have happened. Or this happened because so-and-so and so-and-so. And the dialogue is on the nose. It feels flat. It feels like your exposition galore. And really, if you could show what the consequences of that person's actions or inactions were on the rest of the story, you're doing the legwork of having the feeling of them not being there present in your story. Of course, Gavin and Kate, do you have any comments with regards to that? Do you want to refute what I've said right now and add something else? Let me know. Let Nondeko know, obviously.
I don't think there's anything to refute there, but Lindeka, I wouldn't mind just hearing a little bit more about your problem, because essentially, every story solution does arise from the particulars of the problem. So you're saying that there's a couple of characters that are hugely important to the story, but you only see them once or twice. But I don't know if you hear them or if they are, if there's scenes that they're involved with, or can you just tell us a bit more about who those characters are and why they play such an important role and why they then only appear just very briefly, and how?
So basically, the story starts with, so there's a group of friends, and the reason why they all kind of come together is because the main friend, or the glue in the friendship, is dying because of an illness. And it starts unraveling that perhaps the reason why they found out only at a point where she's dying is taking back to the fact that they were not able to contact her. Now it's being pinpointed to the partner, but the book itself really does focus on how the friends and the group deals with her death and everything else that happens around her. But it also highlights, I'm just trying to describe it properly, but it also highlights the partner's role. I mean, for instance, she moves to her mother's house and he arrives there on one of the days when the friends are visiting, and he kicks them out. So you see his presence, but you also, at some point, they're out for dinner and they talk about their friend and the partner's relationship and how she got to the point where she's on a deathbed. And there's another part where, so there's little bits of events that you hear about, and you literally physically see him on that one scenario where he comes into the house and he kicks them out to say, well, I want to be, I'm the one looking after her. And there's another part where that's a flashback of where the friends are having a conversation about, oh, this is why she didn't come to the party on this day. It's because he was pressed. So you kind of see that scenario happening in their house. So it really is those two scenarios. So I hope I'm explaining it properly, but you hear, you when I say you feel his presence, but you literally do only see him in those events when they are unpacking what got her to that point, and the flashback scene that shows, kind of how she got to the deathbed.
So is he kind of a menace and partly responsible for how she got into the deathbed?
Yes.
Okay, so he's kind of the antagonist, but he's not very present in the film. But his presence is kind of a looming menace in the background that they figure out is the problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, every time you adapt a book, you're kind of always having to choose like what goes in and what goes out, and how to change the storytelling from like that mindscape of the character into physical and actual events. So you do have a couple. I mean, the story, the bit where they kick him out. You've got one strong scene where you'll see him and you'll get that. That's like kind of a given. And the other, so somehow near the beginning of the film, you're going to have to make that presence felt. And it could be that narrative structure, hypothetically, one could start the story with them being kicked out and then asking the question, what's going on? But, pictures and little discussions, just building the question of who is this man in her life, and, what's going on with them. Is, I guess, some way you're going to just have to find some narrative device to keep dropping it in or making it away. It could be, it could be like a certain type of music that he likes to work in, which is a bit dissonant, and you keep dropping it into scenes, or I don't know. There would be, you'd have to look at the actual story, and just find the opportunities you can to kind of make him felt and make him ominous.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do you have anything?
Londeka, I just want to say, have you got permission to work with this book? Have you
Yes.
Okay, great. All right.
Yes.
So that was just my first concern, that you're going to do this work and then you don't have the rights to it. And then to reiterate what Gavin was saying is that, the primary difference between a book and a film is that the book, so much of books take place in a mental space or a heart space, and then film is action. So you might have to change certain elements of the book in order for it to work on screen. And this is why so often people are so angry or disappointed at filmic adaptations, because you have to make different story choices in a film than the story choices you can make in a novel. So just have a look at whether you're going to have to change certain elements and make them far more visible and present than they are in the book, obviously on screen.
Yes, yeah.
That's just
I would. Sorry, I'd also just add to just look at what can represent him symbolically. So it could be, his clothes in the back of the room, or anything that just, speaks to him and his presence. It could be that ugly car that just sits outside the house that's his, or it could be anything that's just kind of imposing on the space without him actually being there, and then you kind of learn that this is his. But you can look at for those things that just symbolically represent that character and bring them in wherever you can.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Londeka. Thanks for the interesting questions as well. And I think if you have a look at the chat, I've put 2 examples of a film and a series that sort of go into the headspace of this problem, and maybe they might yield some solutions for you for your story. Khalid, thank you very much for jumping in. And yes, you do have the question of the day. Please go for it.
Hey guys, thanks for the session. Just a quick question from my side. Obviously, writing is a very isolated craft. And what I want to know just from each of you, because I find the hardest part is to actually sit down and write. Because once you do that, you kind of disappear into the writing, and there's a risk in that sometimes. So my question to you is, what process do you take? Because this I really struggle with, in terms of what process do you take to actually end up at the point where you're going to sit down and write, research character development. Like what, if individually, I know this is kind of cheating, if individually I can, like, you can run me through an exact process, and I mean not exact in terms of detail, but exact in terms of process structure. What do you do individually to kind of like start to shape up the story and then sit down and write, or what is your process basically, but in detail?
I'll jump in first. It's still muted. For me, like, firstly, I need pressure to work. I've always been like a kind of that last minute pressure worker. Like if I've got a deadline or I've got whatever, then that makes it much easier for me to rock up at my computer and do what I need to do. It depends, partly where the script's coming from. So often, if I'm being given a script to rewrite, or if I'm being given a brief, as soon as I read it, then, I'll start to process that in the background and ideas will be happening. So for me, the first thing is just to get myself to read whatever it is that the story is based on, and that'll help a lot. I do like to kind of process stories. So often a lot of the work is just happening intuitively in the background. Once I start writing, I always find it much easier to do basically like a 5-page outline, just a step outline of some sort. I make it very brief. I do kind of a cross between a major turning point document and a step outline. If I can just get that structure down and the basic story understood, just trying to figure out that basic, what's the theme? What does my protagonist want? And where do they end up? If I've got that beginning and ending and I know what the journey is about, then I can structure it. And if I can get it to 5 pages, then, I'm quite ready then to dive into the draft. So then, I'll do that. And there'll be lots of procrastination, but sooner or later I will have, one scene after another and a draft. And if I can get to the end of a draft, that's when life gets easy for me, because then it's much easier for me to put on my editor's cap and make that draft good. But it is for me always like quite a psychological struggle to make my way through the draft, and lots of procrastination and such is common. But deadlines, they always loom, and then that gets me standing and doing my stuff.
Hey, do you want to go?
So when I first started screenwriting, I would just leap into the script and I just start writing it. And then if I ran out of inspiration at a certain point, but I knew another scene that I wanted to do, then I would jump to that scene, and then that would often help unlock the previous scene. But as I have progressed as a screenwriter, and as I've learned more, I have come to truly understand and appreciate that the idea of writing down the premise first and then going to outline and then beat treatment is the best way to go. It's the more disciplined, and then often something will come leaping into my mind, and I'll allow myself to go off and write that bit, but I'll go back to the outline. And once the outline is all working, and in terms of the acts and the turning points, then I go to my drafts, so it's a pretty similar process to the one you follow, Gavin. And if I've just written a commissioned script for a series, for an animation series, so that really was the pitch, then synopsis, then outline and step outline, and then into draft. And by the time I got to draft, the story was so sorted. And I sent it off to the director, and I didn't hear back. So I wrote to him and I said, please, can I have notes for rewrite? And he was like, no, it's all good, because we've worked out the plot points in the outline, what needed to be shifted and changed. So when we got to draft just flew. But so it's been a long process of learning to sort of discipline myself as a creative, where I used to just pour myself straight into the story and then would wander into cul-de-sacs or into mazes or whatever. And so I've learned that, best to follow that outlining process. But if a scene is really pouring into you and you're feeling that moment of inspiration, go with it, then come back to the artist. That's my bit.
Okay, so I think, Khalid, the question that you've asked is, I think, the most quintessential question behind taking the step from someone who likes the idea of writing, or likes the idea of telling a story, and actually making it into an actionable thing that they can use to make a film, to make a series, and also to earn a living off of it. and that is learning to demystify the process. If you look at, for example, you telling a story in a feature film or in a series, that's a marathon. It's going to have, the initial idea, and everyone's got the enthusiasm for the initial idea. But once it starts taking shape in a written form, either through an outline, or if you're going straight into writing the screenplay, at some point or another, you hit a wall. And that wall is, the enthusiasm is mostly gone. You're left with the idea. And now you're sitting yourself with the question, is this something I want to keep pursuing? Is this something that I actually want to make into a film or a series or anything, any form that you want to make? And it's a very difficult question to ask. It is, because it comes down to, why are you telling that story? Is the story something that you will die telling? Is it something that you have to be the one to tell the story? And if you're not making a story that's coming from you, at least, if it's not commissioned, if it's not part of a series, and it's a story that's coming from you personally, if you're not attaching a very deep, fundamental, emotional reason as to why you are the one to tell the story, then you are going to come to a point where coming back to the table after 10 days of writing is almost the next thing it's almost impossible. Or even just starting the story is almost impossible. When you face that blank page, it is a blank page that you can't overcome. So a part of what we've been discussing over here is very personal. So each individual person has their own way of dealing with it. But if I can speak on my perspective on how I deal with it, sometimes I have an idea for a film that just hits me like a lightning bolt. And I know that I have to give it time before I start writing to ensure that I'm writing it for the right reason. If it's just a fanciful idea that I want to take down the line and make into something, it's never going to get made. It's just going to be something that I'm going to give up halfway. So I write down the very small paragraph, the very small idea in a nutshell as to what the story is about, and then I leave it for a while. And then something that I want to do, and something that I do afterwards, is that after a while, I think about it and I say, okay, is this story something that I really want to tell? And is this something that if I am willing to tell, am I going to push it so far as to get it made as well, either as the producer or the director or both? And then I go back to the idea and I say, all right, let me start doing the hard work of taking what is an idea and now telling a story. And I try to look at it from a very dispassionate point of view. I try to be the first audience member for that story, and I give it flesh, I give it bones, I give it everything it needs. And then I really just immerse myself into it, because now I know this thing has to happen. One way or another, I am committed. One way or another, the story only has me as its guardian, as its protector. And now it's a race against time to get this thing made. Because if I give up on the story is gone. It will never come back. So I force myself to write that first draft. I force myself to put that idea into something that feels real, that lives and breathes. And if I have any doubt at that point, I really have to take a step back and consult my own faith. Well, sometimes it's faith, sometimes it's just your own psyche as to, is this the right story for me? And it's going to be question by question every single day that when I'm working at this screenplay, when I'm working at this film, I'll be asking myself, is this the right thing? Is this the right thing? All I know is that most of the times when I've finished writing something, I'm freaking glad that it's done, because now I have a living, breathing thing that I can shape and mold into something that's going to be a film or a series or anything, but it's now alive. It now has its own existence outside of me. And knowing that I have the ability and I have to race towards making that happen is something that informs the next time when I want to write something. Now I know that it is going to come to a point where it's going to exist outside of me, and that's a great thing. And I just have to slog through it and make the thing, give it the best opportunity it has, first at the screenplay level, and then of course producing it, etc. afterwards. So I hope that's like answered some aspect of what you're asking about. But you have to understand, we're asking to bear our emotions. We're asking to bear our deeper inner psyche on paper. And maybe we might be asking ourselves very serious questions about ourselves, our upbringing, and what makes us tick on the page itself. And that's a scary thing. So it's normal to be afraid, and that tension, that fear expresses itself as being unable to write. The desk becomes the worst thing in the world. You just don't want to be at the laptop. You just don't want to be typing in the page. Understand that is fear, and it's fear of maybe figuring out yourself. And once you understand that, you might be able to actually start typing, and you might actually be able to start putting into motion a story that you will give birth to, that you will bring into existence. Okay, so unfortunately run out of time. Khalid, I hope that has answered your question. And I hope that some people in the group who have heard what we've had to say about this feel motivated to write. Khalid?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was really helpful. Obviously, I know it could be a much longer conversation, but yeah, thanks for the help, guys.
No worries, no worries. Everyone, thank you so much for coming through today. I know that some people may have had more questions. As you know, the next time we come to this session, please bring your questions, ask the questions, even if it's unrelated to the topic at point, come back from the previous topic, and we'll definitely be presenting some more information, and you can ask. I hope that today's been very, very, very informative. I just want to thank Kate again for coming on board and presenting a very informative session on character. And really, this is the unfolding of our community. As Gavin has mentioned, we're going to be bringing on more speakers. Kate, this is the first time you're going to be, it's not the last time, it's just the first time. That's what I wanted to say. So thank you again, Kate. I really appreciate you coming through.
Thank you, guys. It's so inspiring. And Tabasul, the thing that you were saying now about being a story guardian and everything, and then hitting the fear of and letting it roadblock you. That was very profound. You always, both of you, always leave me feeling very inspired. Thank you.
Nah. Thank you, Kate. Thank you. Appreciate the kind words.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. I know that Lungelo,
Thanks,
you
guys.
have a question.
Okay, what's up, guys? Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to send you. Lungelo, do you have a quick question and quick comment?
It was just a quick comment, actually. I was going to say to Khalid and Kate as well, and to both of you, the founders of this. I think it's very helpful for me and for all of us to hear these things and these little tips, and facing our fears. And as I say to Khalid, which Kate sort of affirmed to me, when my process is just whenever you hit a wall, try and do some research, get away from the whatever you're writing, maybe, but go do research on the characters or on the situation or whatever the case might be, because sometimes that wall is because you just haven't maybe dug or found the right nugget to develop further that particular scene or that particular character, or whatever the case might be. But overall, just, yeah, this is so good for my psyche that, I'm not the only one who's struggling and drowning in fear and trying to beat that, minute by minute in front of the computer screen. So thank you.
Thanks, Lungelo.
Thanks, Lungelo.
Thanks, everyone, for coming and listening and asking questions. Thanks for this opportunity, guys.
First of many. First of many. Thanks,
Kate.
everyone.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers,
I'm
guys.
going to sign us off. Cheers.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Recording. Is there a recording of this?
Yes, I think.
Yes,
I think.
Uh,